Good afternoon. In my class at Princeton, we have a section each week that's called Deja Vu All Over Again. And we have determined that there is something to learn from the past, but it can also be a danger signal if one doesn't learn the right lessons. The session we're going to do today is one that we probably could have held at almost any moment in the last 30 or 40 years. How to advance the prospects for peace based on lessons that we draw from both successes and failures in the past. Recently, I published a book on this issue relating to American policy called Negotiating Arab-Israeli Peace, and we sought through the mechanism of a study group to determine what lessons we could draw from the American experience that might help the next administration do its job better in attending to the Middle East peace process. Surprisingly to all of us, in the midst of our preparations of this volume, President Bush called for the Annapolis Summit, and we in fact gave the manuscript to the administration in the hope that it would influence some of their policies and practices as well. If there is a logic to this Annapolis process, it is a logic which is well grounded in the lessons of the past. And that is that there are two objectives that the parties are asked to pursue as a result of Annapolis. Number one, to finally come to grips with the final status issues, with the issues that divide Israelis and Palestinians. This process eschews the ideas of interim or transitional arrangements. It doesn't necessarily do away with the idea of graduated implementation, but it basically says that the time has come to grips with the issues that divide the parties: borders, settlements, question of Jerusalem, security, refugees, and even issues such as the electromagnetic spectrum and water and airspace and the like. The second aspect of the Annapolis logic calls for fundamental changes in behavior on the part of the parties. Israel is asked to stop settlement activity and to withdraw, to remove unauthorized settlement outposts. Israel is also asked to increase mobility for Palestinians in the West Bank by removing, consistent with security, as many checkpoints and roadblocks as possible. Palestinians, for their part, are asked, first of all, to not only eschew violence, but also to take action against those who perpetrate violence, to finally begin the process of getting at the infrastructure of terrorism. And secondly, Palestinians are encouraged to create the institutions, both economic and political, of statehood, so that if a Palestinian state is in fact created, it will be not a failed state, but rather a state that will give us confidence that it can succeed. Now, if this logic of Annapolis is to work, there must be a robust role for a third party. If for no other reason that third party, in this case the United States, must do what American administrations have not done well in the past, and that is to engage in monitoring and accountability. Agreements in the Middle East that are not monitored, and agreements for which the parties are not held accountable, are agreements that we know in the past are subject to all kinds of problems. And both parties will find a way to avoid their responsibilities if they're not called on those responsibilities. And so it is imperative for the United States not only to name a monitor, and we have done so in the form of General Fraser, but we must pursue an aggressive monitoring process, bring to the attention of both parties those issues in which they are not fulfilling their commitments, and there have to be consequences if the parties do not fulfill their commitments. But equally, with the idea of monitoring and accountability, there is a role for the United States in following the negotiations closely enough to be able to provide the bridging and creative ideas that the parties may find themselves unable to do despite their best intentions. The outcome of this process, under the best of possible circumstances, is that both societies will, in whatever way they choose, a referendum or an election, decide whether or not they can actually implement this agreement. And by doing this, it will either validate or prove false the idea that the two populations know what the contours are of a final status agreement. And so we have not necessarily a deja vu all over again situation, but we have another opportunity to get at the core issues in this conflict, to change behaviors on the ground, and for the United States to exercise a robust and fair role in trying to bring the parties towards an agreement. That would be the best way of proving that the lessons of failure in the past can actually be learned to create successes today. Thank you.